I think teams are forcing someone other than Mahaney to beat them. That was what we saw in the first half of conference play. Mahaney was able to kind of get whatever he wanted. He was the clutch guy down the stretch for a lot of moments for St. Mary's, and even on Saturday, hitting a clutch 3 there against BYU. But we need to see more out of that offense, and I will say, if the offense doesn't show up like it has the last couple of weeks and go into Spokane with that same efficiency, they're going to be in big trouble. How's it going, everybody? I hope everyone is doing well this week. Welcome to another episode of the Unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. I'm Zach Farmer, and we are in the final week of WCC regular season play. We are only a week and a half away, depending on when you're listening to the podcast, maybe only a week away from the WCC tournament in Las Vegas at the Orleans Arena. And this should be one of the more exciting, one of the more entertaining WCC tournaments I think we will have seen in a long time. And looking at just like where we are in the standings, I think you can kind of agree, like we have a lot of things that have now started to vet out over the past week's games, that we still know what's happening at that top line. Gonzaga, St. Mary's are still going back and forth on that one. And for the rest of the league, we'll dive into a lot of the scenarios. We'll also take a look at what I think are who should be on the All-WCC teams and the conference awards. We'll again dive more deeply into Gonzaga St. Mary's round 2, which is this Saturday, up in Spokane. College game day is going to be there for that one, so it adds an extra level of excitement. First time they'll have been in Spokane since 2009. I'll touch a little bit on, especially after this, few of the finishes this week, who are the best closers in the WCC? And I think there's a real short list on that one, and we'll dive into that. But first, I want to start with Santa Clara. And I want to start with Santa Clara because, well, for a number of reasons. First off, let's just start with they will now be the 3 seed in Las Vegas for the second straight year. And this was a team that was in the middle of the pack with everybody else just 2 weeks ago. And Santa Clara has put on a run as of late. They have now won 20-plus games in back-to-back seasons in 3 of their last 4. Think about this, like they are 9-1 in WCC play against teams that are not named Gonzaga or St. Mary's. So Santa Clara has been doing the job against everybody else. They also are shooting far better against those teams than they are against the Zags or the Gaels. Against St. Mary's, they were shooting 41% in the 2 games. Gonzaga, 43% in the 2 games. Against everybody else, they're shooting nearly 50%. And it really is starting to look like Herb Sendek now has something consistent going. I think that, and I think there was always this question mark of can someone else in the league be that consistent other team? We know Gonzaga will be there. We know St. Mary's will be there. We knew for the longest time it was BYU up until the last few years. But could someone be consistent enough to hang around with those other teams? And for a moment, it looked like it might have been USF. But if you now really look at track record over the last few seasons, it's actually Santa Clara. Because even last year, like USF, keep this in mind, did finish in 4th, not 3rd. It was Santa Clara who ended up with that 3 slot. And now this is a team that has that has started to go on a run. They've now won, I believe it's five or six straight. They're picking up steam. They're picking up momentum. And this week really should not be all that too different with the two games that they have this week being, and I just lost their schedule. The fact that they will end up playing San Diego, and they end up also playing, I believe it's Pacific or Portland, one of the two. So like this is a team, Pepperdine, actually Pepperdine is the other team. This is a team that is starting to roll, and now they're starting to pick up wins that they're supposed to pick up. Like this should be a fairly soft week for the Broncos. They should roll into WCC play on a high. I fully expect they're 9-5 right now in WCC play. I fully expect them to finish 11-5. And again, considering where we were looking at about 4 weeks ago, this did not, it looked like Santa Clara was going to kind of be jumbled in with everybody else, but they have clearly taken that step forward and separated themselves from the rest of the WCC, at least like that middle tier of the WCC. And obviously we can talk about just like the performances that from Keyshawn Justice. We can talk about Carlos Stewart, but this really has been, it starts and ends with Brandon Pajemski. Just looking over the last few games, he had only 16 against Portland, but that was a game that was as great of an offensive showing as Santa Clara has had over the last 20 years. But again, you look back, 23 against USF, 20 against San Diego, 30 against LMU, 26 against BYU at BYU. This is Brandon Pajemski is starting to play some really good basketball right now. Again, like there looked like there was a little bit of a lull, or at least like a little bit of a tougher stretch for him, and those included the Gonzaga St. Mary's games. And that's pretty fair when you consider like who the opponent was. But now he's starting to kind of like round back into what we saw earlier in the season, and the Broncos, right along with them, have started to pick up some steam going into Vegas. So this Santa Clara team is looking sharp. They're looking a lot better. Now, all that being said, they're still hovering right around that 85 to 90 range in the net and in KenPom. So I mean, don't expect the Santa Clara team to be in consideration for an at-large bid at any point. Like, I don't think that's what you should expect from this team. Maybe they get an NIT selection. Maybe they make a run in the WCC tournament. But to get to the NCAA tournament, their only route at this stage is going to be win in Vegas. And as we know, even if they're going to be in the semis and that's going to be their first game, or in the quarters and that's going to be their first game, because that means they'll start on Saturday as the 3 seed, they're still going to have to run through both St. Mary's and Gonzaga. And as we talked a little bit about last week, Santa Clara probably does have the best shot to make that run of the remaining WCC teams. But we haven't seen anybody be able to do it back-to-back against Gonzaga St. Mary's in the WCC tournament since 2008 when San Diego did it in their home gym, which was also the last of the school site WCC tournaments. And as we're talking about the WCC tournament, I'm going to transition into talking about what the scenarios are for everybody else, because there's a lot that's going to there's a lot that we can actually start to look at, and I'll start to quickly go through the scenarios for each team and which what are the seed lines that everyone is likely going to be at, and I'll start at the bottom. So Pepperdine, who is currently in 10th, is going to be the 10 seed. Like they're locked into that one. So nothing more to kind of add there. San Diego is currently the 9, but they're probably going to end up being 8 or 9, likely the 9 through most of the scenarios that are left. For them to get any higher than that, they would have to beat both Gonzaga and Santa Clara this weekend. That just seemed that just seems like an incredibly tall task for San Diego to pull off, especially when the game against Gonzaga is up in Spokane. For Portland is one of the more interesting teams remaining because there's a scenario they could still be a 5, but there's also a scenario that exists where they are the 9. And a lot of that is it's partly on them. They do have to win both of their games to have a possibility at the 5 seed, but then they need help. They're going to need help from some of the other teams that are also we're going to talk about here for that to work out in their favor. BYU picked up conference loss number 9 on Saturday against St. Mary's, and this will be the first time and the final time, they will finish under 500 in WCC play. They will not be able to finish any higher than 5th, so they will not get an auto bid to the quarterfinal round. They will have to play in either the first or second rounds. Right now, they are the 7 seed, which means they would be playing in that opening round day, that first round day on Thursday. Obviously, a very unusual place for BYU. Again, their range is 5 to 7. Pacific also still has a shot to get up to 5. Right now, they're in 6th, and there's a few more scenarios that play into their favor, although they don't have too many of the tiebreakers with the teams surrounding them. They don't hold tiebreakers against USF. They don't hold tiebreakers against BYU. And those are the 2 teams that are right on either side of them. So Pacific 5 through 8 is their range. Most of the scenarios I have seen will put them at the 6th seed, but that still puts them starting the tournament on Friday. So it will give them at least 1 bye in this tournament. USF also has pretty wide range. They could be 4 or they could be 8. There are still tiebreaker scenarios that don't favor USF. There are a few that do favor USF. The only scenario for USF to still end up being a 4 is if LMU loses its game against Pepperdine and then USF has to sweep its remaining 2, that being against Portland and then going to Provo to beat BYU. That's it. That's the only scenario for USF to still be the 4 seed. And then the most likely of the 4 seeds is LMU. LMU's range is pretty small. They're going to be the 4 or the 5. But as we know, this is a difference of starting the tournament on Friday and starting the tournament on Saturday. So for LMU, it's real simple. If you want the 4 seed, beat Pepperdine. That's it. It's going to be real simple for the Lions. Santa Clara is locked in at the 3, so for them, it's really help whatever resume you have and keep this momentum going into the tournament. Then we have the top 2, which we know are going to be St. Mary's and Gonzaga. Right now, St. Mary's has a 1-game lead. They meet each other this Saturday in Provo, but both teams have a game in between that they need to make sure that they lock up before meeting each other. Gonzaga will be hosting San Diego, and St. Mary's will be hosting at senior night on Thursday against Pacific. So, for both of these teams, for St. Mary's, the scenario is it can be simple. Win both your games this week, and you're the 1 seed. Period. And then you're the regular season champion outright without having to share it with Gonzaga. That is the only scenario in which they can. I was going to say that's the only scenario that's actually not completely accurate. The other scenario is that they win against Pacific, Gonzaga loses to San Diego, and then it doesn't matter what happens on Saturday. But so here's the way the tiebreaker scenario is going to break down for, at least it's far more simple to go through the tiebreaker scenario for St. Mary's Gonzaga because it only involves the 2. For seeds 4 through 9 right now, it's still completely dependent on how each of those teams do. And again, we're talking about still 5, 6 teams that are involved in this and where they could end up. So for St. Mary's Gonzaga, the tiebreaker scenarios are simple. If they end up tied after Saturday's game, it will go through your individual matchups against each WCC opponent, starting from the top of the standings and going down. Obviously, we know that they will have split with each other, so you move on to the next team. They both took care of Santa Clara twice, so you move on from Santa Clara. The only other loss that each of them have is the same team, and that's LMU. So again, you kind of move on from there. Assuming that Gonzaga and St. Mary's don't lose their Thursday game, Pacific or San Diego, it would then go to the net and what their current net ranking is. A week ago, it looked a little further apart from each other. I believe it was St. Mary's was still sitting at 6 or 7, and Gonzaga was down at, I think they were as low as 14, but it was like between that 12 and 14 range. Gonzaga is now sitting at 10, and St. Mary's is sitting at 7. This is going to be very tight. I don't know if a win over St. Mary's moves the needle enough in the net to have them leapfrog St. Mary's, or if that loss knocks St. Mary's down enough for Gonzaga to overtake them. So to say that this week still does have meaning, it clearly does. A lot of meaning. Remember that St. Mary's will be searching for its first regular season WCC championship since 2012. Its first WCC regular season championship where they didn't have to share it, I should say. They did share in 2013, and I believe it was also in 2018 they shared. It also means avoiding Santa Clara in that potential semifinal round. And then again, I don't know. Maybe if you're one of these two teams, you'd rather play Santa Clara first, because then the other option is you might have to see LMU again as the 1 seed, and we already know that LMU has picked up wins against both teams, and obviously Gonzaga repaid the favor this past time. But this does mean something. It's going to mean something for Gonzaga too. Like obviously, like they want to continue the streak of being the WCC champion, going into Vegas as the 1 seed, as the favorite, because they came in the Moraga just a few weeks ago and they weren't the favorite. I do think that the script has flipped a bit from the matchup a few weeks ago where it was St. Mary's was playing really well and Gonzaga was the one struggling. Now it's kind of the opposite. St. Mary's is struggling a little bit more these past few weeks. They did lose to LMU in that stretch. Almost lost to San Diego, that was a nightmare of a game to watch. That was really, really ugly. And Gonzaga, in the meantime, has found their swagger again. They went down to LA and just put it on LMU, winning that game by 40. That was the Gonzaga team I think many of us thought we could see. And still, periodic times, we have seen that team. It's whether they can be consistent enough with it. But again, going into Saturday, I think that this feels like a little bit of a flip of the script from what we saw a few weeks ago. And there's also some other things to look at as far as St. Mary's goes on that. So we'll recap a little bit on the seeding scenarios for Vegas. So St. Mary's 1-2, St. Mary's Gonzaga 1-2. Likely this is going to come down to what happened on Saturday, and if they end up tiebreaker, it's the net. So we'll see who ends up with a better net. If Gonzaga does win, it's going to be real close. Obviously, if St. Mary's wins, it's a wrap. St. Mary's will be the regular season champion and the 1 seed in Vegas. 3 is locked in, Santa Clara. at the 4 seed, most scenarios, I mean, this is easy. LMU wins against Pepperdine, they're the 4. The only other scenario is they lose, and USF then has to sweep its 2 games, Portland and BYU, for them to drop to a 5. Again, LMU's in the driver's seat here. They should be the 4 seed. USF, most scenarios have them as the 5. There's still a few scenarios that could drop them all the way down to 8, but 5 is likely where they're going to end up. Pacific, there's only one scenario that really puts them at a 5, so they're likely, most scenarios put them at the 6, but they could be as low as 8. BYU will finish below 500 in WCC play. Their range is from 5 to 7, so they will start the tournament no later than Friday in Vegas. But they could also very well end up in the first round game on Thursday, and that is going to be the first time they'll ever play in that round. Portland, biggest range outside of USF, they could be 5, they could be 9. Most likely, it looks like they're probably going to be 7 or 8. That's the most likely outcome for Portland. So they'll be playing in that opening round game. San Diego, 8-9. They have Gonzaga, Santa Clara this week. I can't see them winning either of those games. So I would think San Diego is going to end up being the 9 seed. And then Pepperdine is going to be the 10. All right. So let's transition out of that and let's talk a bit about this matchup between St. Mary's and Gonzaga, which is going to decide the regular season championship. It's going to be Spokane is hosting College Game Day on Saturday morning. This has bragging rights. This is tournament seedings. This is NCAA tournament seedings. This has all the ramifications of a game that is going to be the marquee game in all of college basketball on Saturday. And we did get a little bit of a preview on this past Saturday of what the seedings are looking like right now. The tournament committee released its top 16 teams. Gonzaga was team number 15 of the 16, so they were a 4 seed. There was a little bit of a conversation about St. Mary's and where St. Mary's is likely, or how much consideration St. Mary's received. But they're receiving consideration for one of those top 4 being a 4 seed, of top 4 seed. And I think it's no secret that like this game on Saturday, and then if they were to meet up again in Vegas, could completely flip what we see from these two and as far as seeds. If Gonzaga were to win out and win the rest of their WCC games and then beat St. Mary's twice, they could probably sneak up to a 3. If St. Mary's is able to win both of the Gonzaga games, they will probably end up being a higher 4 seed. I don't know if they can get all the way up to 3, but definitely a 4. If they split, doesn't matter which of the splits it is. Does it matter if St. Mary's wins in Spokane? Does it matter more if they're the auto bid in Vegas? And that will be for the tournament committee to decide of like, which championship means more, regular season or tournament on that front. I think it would be real hard pressed to think that St. Mary's is going to fully sweep Gonzaga and win 3 times against that team. It would be real hard for me to see the scenario where Gonzaga doesn't at least take one of these games, but which is more important? Is it going to be the Saturday game in Spokane or the championship game in Vegas? Which is more important? Metrically, maybe the game in Spokane does, but a tournament championship means something still. The automatic qualifier does mean something. And I think that's the direction it's probably going to lean, is tournament championship is the greater win, even if metrically it doesn't make a whole lot of difference, or it's not as good of a win as the true road game in Spokane. But that's what we're looking. That's what these teams are playing for. But now, the game itself, the matchups themselves. Gonzaga played 32, 35 minutes of that game in Moraga with the lead and looked in command of that game. And then, as we know, Aiden Mahaney happened. He took over the last 4 minutes of regulation and then also overtime. St. Mary's was able to escape with a win. They dominated the overtime period. This was a St. Mary's team that still did make it difficult for Gonzaga offensively in the second half. Gonzaga got off to a great start in that first half. They were playing some of the best defense we had seen them play in months. It was maybe the most crisp offense we have seen them play in months. Now, their offense has continued to play well since then. So Gonzaga's offense is still humming. We've seen great performances from Julian Strother over the last few weeks. We've seen great performances continued from Drew Timme. We've got Anton Watson has been the key guy at times. The Gonzaga's offense has really been more balanced over the last few weeks. And so that's going to be the biggest challenge, is especially in that building. I think it's one thing for Gonzaga to get off to a good start on the road. If you let Gonzaga get going in their building, you're going to be in for a rough night, because trying to take the kennel out of the game, trying to take the kennel club, the students, out of their excitement once the Zags get going becomes really hard in that building. We heard it a few weeks back in one of the interviews when we talked to former St. Mary's player Bo Levesque, that when that crowd gets going, the floor is shaking in that building when you're on the court. So you don't want to get yourself into a position where you're not only fighting the players on the court, but you're also fighting the fans and you're fighting the building itself. So that's one thing to look at in this matchup. But I think the most important thing, the one thing that seems like has really changed in the last few weeks, has been the St. Mary's offense. And it has at times completely vanished in these last few weeks. Let's taking a look at just these last few games. Through the first 7 games of WCC play, St. Mary's was shooting 49% from the field, which is a few percentage points higher than their season average. So they were playing really well. And this was also at the same time Aiden Mahaney's debut in the WCC. And in those first, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games of WCC play, Mahaney was shooting 54% from the field while averaging 16 points a game. Pretty good for basically his first time through the WCC. We saw him really take command and really take control of games. And in the last few weeks, this has kind of flipped on its head. For Mahaney, the last 5 games, he's now only shooting 41% from the field, still averaging 16 a game, but the percentage has come down. Teams have made him a volume shooter, and that has proven to be a challenge for St. Mary's. This is not the way they want to. That's not what they want to have happen. They don't want to have someone become a volume shooter, because that's not the way this team plays on the efficiency front. They want to find the best shot, and a lot of times over the last few weeks, it seems that there have been more forced shots. Teams have played maybe a little better defense against this team. It's not just missing open shots, although there have been plenty of open shots that have not been made that we normally see be made. And I don't want to, and this is not all on Mahaney on that front. The team as a whole has shot 42% over that same stretch. On Saturday, though, they did shoot really well. They shot 52% from the field. So against BYU, against a good defensive team in BYU, they shot well. But there have been way too many times that we've seen over the last few weeks that the offense just disappears. And the San Diego game last Thursday is a perfect example of that. They went the last 7 minutes of that ball game without a field goal. Had a 20-point lead in the second half, and San Diego cut it to 3 within the last 30 seconds. San Diego had a shot to win that game after being down by 20 in the second half because St. Mary's could not score the basketball. They couldn't get a bucket. And that's concerning. That's troubling for a lot of reasons. Because San Diego is not a good defensive team. That's not something that should happen. This is, as we know, like, this is an NCAA tournament team, and you should not have stretches like that for extended periods of time against inferior teams to yours. And San Diego, for all of what they have done so far this year, it's like they're just not as talented as St. Mary's, and that should not have happened. Can they fix it? Of course they can. Logan Johnson over the last couple of weeks has been amazing despite the fact that the overall team has struggled. This guy had 30 plus points in both games last week, and then he had another great performance against BYU on Saturday. This past Saturday, he has really kind of taken the offensive load and the offensive responsibility as we've come down the stretch here. And it's great to see him do that because we know he can get to the basket whenever he wants and all of that. But we need to see somebody else come to help him. Somebody else needs to be that consistent guy, whether it be Mitchell Saxon. We know Mahaney, if he can be a little bit more efficient, I think that will be incredibly helpful. I think teams are forcing someone other than Mahaney to beat them. That was what we saw in the first half of conference play. Mahaney was able to kind of get whatever he wanted. He was the clutch guy down the stretch for a lot of moments for St. Mary's, and even on Saturday, hitting a clutch 3 there against BYU. But we need to see more out of that offense. And I will say, if the offense doesn't show up like it has the last couple of weeks and go into Spokane with that same efficiency, they're going to be in big trouble. And if you made me pick right now and thinking about going into Saturday, Gonzaga just looks like they're playing better right now. And these two teams, it's a coin flip. Whoever is playing better at that moment, I think, is going to be the one who's going to ride into that game with a better shot to win. And right now, that would probably be Gonzaga. All right. So I was talking a little bit about how clutch Mahaney has been. And it did get me thinking about a number of things. And one of which is, who's the best closer in the WCC? And we've gotten a lot of great examples over the last month and a half, 2 months of who are the guys that you want the ball in their hand at the end of a game. Who do I want to get a shot, create their shot, make a play for someone else? Who are those guys that I trust to do that? And I know there are a few other guys, but the three that come to mind, just based on what we have seen multiple times over the last few weeks, it's Julian Strother, it's Aiden Mahaney, and it's Cam Shelton. And right now, I think I would even rank them. I think right now I would put Strother third, Mahaney second, and Shelton first. And it's a coin flip between Strother and Mahaney right now. Like, Julian Strother has hit some really clutch shots for the Zags over the last month and a half. So has Mahaney. And then obviously Cam, and maybe this is the difference. of why I have Cam Shelton ahead of the others. Because I think Mahaney and Strother have had moments where they may not be having the best game, but then they'll hit the one shot toward the end of a game that puts their team over the top and gets them the win. Cam Shelton has been a force of nature against multiple teams in conference play. Thinking about just what happened on Saturday against Pacific, the Lions looked dead in the water with about 2 minutes to go. And Cam Shelton scores the last 7-8 points of that ball game. And he just takes over these contests. He did it against St. Mary's a couple of weeks ago, where it was give him the ball and get out the way. And that's something that you don't see too much of right now in the WCC. There's a few guys who can definitely take over a game for long stretches, but in times when it's mattered the most, and the time when the team needs a bucket, needs to stay in it, and then hit game winners, which we've seen Cam Shelton do as well, that has been the guy that to me, if you were to ask me right now, who am I taking with the game on the line? It's I'm giving the ball to Cam Shelton right now. He's been so good this year, and then obviously he dropped 40 on Pacific just the other night. But again, it's almost nitpicking between these three, between Shelton, Mahaney, and Strother. You could pick any one of them, and I think you'd fare pretty well at the end of a game with the ball in their hands. And again, I almost for those talked about earlier of how maybe Gonzaga and St. Mary's wouldn't want to be the one, so they don't have to be on the LMU side of the bracket. Cam Shelton is the one reason I say that, because we've seen him take over in the kennel, and we've seen him take over against St. Mary's. He's done it against the two best teams in this conference, and that's where I'm I gotta go with Shelton. He's done it against the best. And yes, both Mahaney and Strother hit game winners in Provo. Mahaney took over the game at the end against Gonzaga. We've seen Strother do the same. It wasn't at the end of the game, but he was the reason, one of the prime reasons at the beginning of the LMU game that they just curb stomped them in that game. All right. And this starts to kind of lead me into wanting to do a little bit of a preview of who I think the WCC awards are going to go to. And also I'll go over the WCC first team, which does have 10 people, should be 5, but I'll name the 10 but then I'll pick my 5 who would be my actual first team. All right. So let's go ahead and we'll start at the bottom of the awards and work our way through. So we'll start with the Sixth Man of the Year. This one was hard because I don't think there's been a whole lot of, quote, sixth men who have remained guys coming off the bench. We've had a lot of guys start there and then have worked their way into the starting lineup, worked their way back into the starting lineup. Obviously, Mahaney, you could have put into that conversation early on, but he's been a starter for the last 3 months. Same you could say for Marcellus Earlington. He was also in that position where he wasn't starting initially, but he's now starting. I think it's 22 of his 29 games, so I wouldn't consider him in that either. So, again, looking up and down the rosters of a lot of these teams, the one that keeps coming back, the one I think who's been the most consistent and has remained a player coming off the bench is Malachi Smith. He's one of the best three-point shooters in the WCC. He has been that additional offensive option that Gonzaga has needed at times. He's been a solid defender most of the season. So Malachi Smith One, because he has been so good all year long, but also because there haven't been too many guys who are consistently good in that role thus to this point in the season, and we're only a week away from the regular season being done. All right. Next one I'll go to is Newcomer of the Year. This one was obvious, then it wasn't obvious, but I think we're back to obvious. And it's Brandon Pajemski. And he has been everything for Santa Clara. He's been their leading scorer. He leads in rebounding. He is our leader in assists. Like he fills up the stat box so much. He has filled the vacancy of Jalen Williams as well as anybody could have ever thought. He has brought Santa Clara back into third, where a lot of people, myself included, was thinking Santa Clara was going to be maybe down in like 5th or 6th place, and here they are again, going to be awaiting their opponent in the quarterfinal round. This is another 20-win season for this team, and Pajemski is at the center of all of it. Like, he has been that guy all year long, and so yeah, I think Pajemski's the easy call here. Defensive Player of the Year. I feel like this one is pick a St. Mary's player and run with it. But I said it a few weeks back, and I'll say it again. I think this year, the guy who has stood out all year long as the glue guy to this defense is Kyle Bowen. And this is a no disrespect to Logan Johnson, because he has been an incredible on-ball defender. He is the best, in my mind, he's the best one-on-one defender in the WCC. But Kyle Bowen has been the glue that makes the defense, that makes this defense work. He can guard multiple positions. He's one of the team's best rebounders. He doesn't beat you in any way. He's willing to take on the toughest assignments, much like Logan Johnson is. But Bowen has just been so consistent all year long. And I compared him at one point to Draymond Green in the way that's like he's kind of like the captain back there. Like he can play almost safety and guard multiple positions, and he's the more recognizable vocal guy on the court. And so that I would go Kyle Bowen, slight edge over Logan Johnson, but really, like, if it went to either one of them, like, that's where it should fall for Defensive Player of the Year. Coach of the Year. This one also seems obvious, at least obvious to me, unless things change on Saturday. If St. Mary's ends up with at least a share of the WCC title, I think it's an easy call. It's Randy Bennett. I think you could very easily make the case that this has been his best. This has been the best coaching job he's done in his tenure at St. Mary's. He picked up win number 500 earlier this year. You could also make the case this might be his best team. Obviously, time will tell on that. They got to get to the tournament, and we'll see there and everything else. But at this stage, I think you'd be hard-pressed to not give this to Randy Bennett with the job that he's done, the defense he's put together, integrating both Saxon as your starting center, after losing key guys like Kuzi and Toss, but then to just keep it rolling like nothing happened, to integrate a freshman at the point guard position and it all work just the way you wanted it to. So I think it would be hard pressed to not say it's him. But if I was going to pick another and say, like, at least there should be some consideration, it's Herb Sendek at Santa Clara. Again, back-to-back 20-win seasons, back in third place. after a year where there were pretty moderate, low expectations going into the year, at least externally, about what this team was capable of, Santa Clara has done a great job being able to keep this train going, keep it moving. Because Santa Clara could have very well, like, after you lose a guy like Jalen Williams, just fall right back to where you were. And they didn't. They may have another NBA guy in Pajemski. Some of the mock drafts have him as a second-round pick right now. You go from one NBA guy to another NBA guy and hold your position in the conference. I think that should definitely be under consideration. Slight nod to Stan Johnson, who completely took this LMU team back to relevancy after last year, where we thought they might have been they were left for dead. Myself included, who picked them to finish 9th. Then Player of the Year. A lot of these awards I feel have been pretty easy. This is the one that feels the hardest. And it comes down to 3 guys for me. It's Cam Shelton, Brandon Pajemski, and Drew Timme. I think Shelton's number 3 on this list. He's had a great year. He's had an amazing year. But this is a team that's going to finish this is a team that's going to finish in 4th, and the 2 that are ahead of them their teams will be better. And that does count for something to me. Then we're down to Pajemski and Timme. For me, again, like, I'm thinking it's Pajemski or Timme. And geez, this is hard because Drew Timme has the pedigree. Drew Timme was the Player of the Year a year ago. He has continued to be in the National Player of the Year conversation. He is still one of the best offensive weapons in the entire country and has continued to show so in WCC play. He has not really tapered off at all. He's still shooting 61% from the field. He's still averaging more than 20 points a game. And sure, like, the rebounding numbers aren't great for Timme. I mean, he's actually only grabbing around 5 a game. So, like, it is a little weird to think about Timme in that respect, but Timmy's at 7 a game. Take that back. This is where it becomes challenging because that team is so good. How good could they be without Drew Timme? And I think this year actually might be a larger gap. I don't like Strother would have had to pick up more of the load and everything else. How good is Timme? How much better does Timme make Gonzaga? And then I think about how much better does Pajemski make Santa Clara? And Pajemski's kept them relevant more than anything. Like, he has caught the eye of everyone around the country just because of what he's been able to do, and the fact that he transferred from Illinois, where he wasn't really playing at all, and then comes to Santa Clara and immediately is averaging a near double-double a game. It really has been an incredible, incredible story to just see how good Pajemski has become. And then even in conference play, you can even say, like, it's probably gotten at least a little bit better. Where in conference play, he's the 2nd leading scorer behind Cam Shelton. He's shooting 51% from the field. He's shooting 51% from 3 in conference play, which again, that in itself is incredible. Pajemski's 3rd in rebounding. He leads the team in assists. Like, he's averaging a little over a steal a game. He's checking all the boxes as well. And this is what makes thinking about this award so hard. And I know a lot of Gonzaga fans are going to say that it's been Timmy from the beginning, that it has to be him. And like, I mean, maybe, but if I had a vote, and obviously I don't, I almost might just coin flip this thing and then just go with whoever it gives me. And right now, I'd take Brandon Pajemski right now. Like from beginning to end, I think he's just meant so much more to his team and for me. And maybe I'm conflating player of the year and most valuable together to an extent, but the numbers bear it too. The numbers overall have been better than Drew Timmy's. And you can say, like, Timmy has more help. Sure. Yeah, he does. But I don't think that should also be something you take away from Pajemski just because he has to carry more of the load. So, man, it would. We could have done this last year too, theoretically. I'm picking. I'd pick Pajemski for Player of the Year. I also had him for Newcomer of the Year. Again, you could have done that with Chet Holmgren a year ago, although he won Defensive Player of the Year and Newcomer, so there was at least 2 awards one guy got. And it may happen again this year. It makes a lot of sense to me. He's a guy that has been one of the best, if not the best players in the conference since we started back in November. So I would go with Pajemski. All right, so I'm going to quickly roll through the WCC first team that I put together. 10 guys. I was back and forth on a few others, but this is where I landed. So, and I'll go by school as I'm running through. So I put 2 Gonzaga players, Timmy Strother. Those are the 2 Gonzaga players that would make my first team. I've got 3 St. Mary's guys: Logan Johnson, Aiden Mahaney, Mitchell Saxon. I don't think that you can have too much of an argument with those 3. Again, I am not ranking the top 5 yet. I'm just going by school for now. LMU, 1, Cam Shelton. That's an easy call. Santa Clara, 2. One is I think both are pretty obvious. Brandon Pajemski, Carlos Stewart. Then you get the teams that are actually at the bottom of the league, but I think they deserve one apiece. Pepperdine, Max Lewis. I mean, you take a look at his numbers. I mean, he has been every bit the NBA prospect we all thought he would be. The defense definitely is lacking, but it's hard to take away anything else that he's been able to do this season. And then, you know what? A guy who just stuffs the stat sheet, Erlington at San Diego. It's really hard to take away what he's been able to do this season. And this might have been Eric Williams had Eric Williams not gotten banged up toward the end of the season. I mean, Erlington is averaging 17.5 a game. He's also averaging almost 7 rebounds a game, and that number has gone up in WCC play. So I'm giving it to Erlington only because I think he's just been slightly healthier than Eric Williams. And it would not upset me or really make me question if they flipped those 2 and Eric Williams was the one that made that team. A few guys that I left off, Fuschar Ori was just on the outside of my list. I had Khalil Shabazz right outside. Eric Williams was also right outside of my list. Tyler Robertson was also right there. Moses Wood I had for a little bit. But yeah, that's my 10. Timmy, Strother, Johnson, Mahaney, Saxon, Shelton, Pajemski, Stewart, Lewis, Erlington. And for the 5, if I'm going actual first team, Timmy, Strother, Shelton, Pajemski, And then I would say it's coin flip Mahaney or Saxon, but I think I would lean Mitchell Saxon because he's been the most consistent all year long. So that would be my first team. Timmy Strother, Saxon, Shelton, Pajemski. The rest of the team, Johnson, Mahaney, Stewart, Lewis, Earlington. I think it's a pretty good 10. So going into this week, last week of WCC play, 4 games on Thursday, 4 games on Saturday. I think we can start to look at this and really map out. I mean, the games this week are going to be fascinating. We know what we're going to get out of Gonzaga St. Mary's on Saturday. We know what we're going to see there. You can't, but I think a few just to watch. I think you have to watch out for what USF is going to do this week. That's going to change a lot of what happens in the middle. USF is hosting Portland on Thursday, and then they travel to Provo, which will be BYU's last regular season WCC game. Also, just keep an eye on Pacific this week. Pacific's at St. Mary's. This is the first time they're seeing St. Mary's all year. Based on what we've seen over the last few weeks, I would not sleep on the Tigers in that game. I think St. Mary's needs to show something on the offensive end, a little bit more than what we have seen as of late. Pacific is not a terribly good defensive team. They will also try to run up the score. They're going to try to run. It's going to be gritty. It's going to be ugly, but like that's a game you cannot overlook. So I think that's a key one to look at on Thursday. But again, a lot of seeds still up for grabs. 1 and 2 still up for grabs. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all still up for grabs with 1 week to go, with really just 2 game days to go. And then we're off to Vegas. Finally off to Vegas for the WCC tournament at the Orleans. I'll be in the building, so it'll be exciting to get down there, to see all the fans, to get to experience it one more time in that building. Obviously not for the last time, but just one more time with the camaraderie of WCC fans, because I do feel like that's something that for anyone who has gone to Vegas for the tournament knows, like, there is something special about when all of those fans do get together. And while we are on each other during the games, it's fun. The tournament weekend is fun. It's great to meet up with old friends, meet some new ones, and really get to experience the whole event. So 1 more week of regular games, then on to Vegas. Only a couple of weeks until Selection Sunday. Only a few weeks until the NCAA tournament. This is the most exciting time of the sports calendar. I love this time of year. It's going to be exciting. And I will wrap this episode up. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. Like and favorite it on your favorite streaming service. Follow me on Twitter and TikTok at Post by Zach. And until next week, have a good one, and I will catch you later.